It's Tuesday again.
It is Tuesday again.
Already.
Already.
How's everybody doing? Glad to see y'all this morning. Well, actually, I'm not seeing you, but you're seeing me, technically. We happy to be back doing our live stuff again, back in our own room here. And we've got some folks over here doing some stuff on the aviation side. So we're kind of in our corner where we are. We've modified. Jarrett can bob and weave. JP's good at that. So we're set up here. I thought I'd take just a second. My CEO, Buddy Simpkins, and I were talking yesterday, with everything that's going on, and and it just, I feel like I'm 800 years old just talking about, I can't believe all the changes that are going on in the world and all this other stuff. And, and he and I were talking about this. It made me remember, of something that I've just been reading here lately. I should do it a lot more, but I've been reading lately in Revelation. It was funny that when Jesus came back to John, and the church in Ephesus was like the model church. They had done so much for the poor, done so much. They were just, and yet he said, but as awesome as they are, there is one thing though, and he said it wasn't that they lost it, they've left their first love. See, there's a difference between losing something and leaving something. If you lose something, you do that accidentally. If you leave something, it's deliberate, right? If you lose something, you don't know where to find it because it's lost. But if you leave something, you know where you left it. So into what Buddy and I were saying yesterday too, in the midst of all this, there is a solution for all of this. And it's LOVE. It's just loving your neighbor as yourself. Loving God with all your soul, all your heart, and all your mind. It's love will conquer all of this. It seems like everything around us wants to turn us the other way, go towards hate, go towards not liking this person or angry towards this group or that group or the other. So that's what I'm going to do this morning when I pray. I'm just going to pray that we would just be more imitators of Christ in love. Man, he showed love to everybody. People spitting on him, doing everything they did to him, and yet he showed love to them. So that's what I'm going to do first thing. We're going to pray, and then we'll go over what we're going to do today. All right? Father, thank you for so much for this time today. Father, into what we were saying earlier, we know that love is the answer. It was a very simple answer that Jesus gave when he asked what's the most important commandments. He told him. So Father, just in the midst of all this, I know what the media and the government, all these other things would have us do and turn on one another and be angry at one another, all this other stuff. But Father, it just all boils down to loving one another. And we're all created in your image. And none of us any better, any worse than anybody. We're all just slugging it out down here. And in the midst of all of this that's going on, any of us that have found you, we just want to introduce you to others. So, Father, that's what this is really all about. Thank you for this time today, for us to learn our craft better. We continue to lift up Chad, he and his family, and the doctors. We lift up Scott's family. They're still getting over that loss. And Father, I also lift up, we've got a couple of people here. They've got some needs that I will just allow them to remain unnamed, but I do want to lift those folks up to you. You know who they are. We've been praying for them earlier today. So all of these things this morning, I ask and say, according to the will of the one who paid it all, my brother, Jesus Christ. Amen. Cool. All right, 2021 webinar number 20. Okay, so we're going to go over today part 2 of that, where we've got a 9S meter. You remember, we'll talk about it a little bit more here at the church. We'll go over it a little bit, the preview, before we start in. But this is the second part of testing that 9S meter at the Padmount out there. And we will finish this up next week. So here's what we're going to do today. We'll talk a little bit about what happened last week, that part 1, kind of get up to where we are. Then we're going to show connecting the 3 series up. And we're going to run the meter test, and then we're going to analyze those results. And then the time hit kind of funny on this one as far as where to make the cut. And JP and I were going back and forth on this. So it's cut at a funny time, so it's going to be shorter today, but it's going to be a longer next week when we're going to go through the entire CT test of it, because that's where we really found our issues and problems and stuff on there. And it's pretty cool the way it gets worked out. So you're going to really want to see this. But what I wanted to talk about today too is this troubleshooting scenario. Saw one of our meter techs out there in the field, and he did a great job, and I wanted to talk about how he figured out what the problem was. It was a great bit of troubleshooting there on his part, so I got hats off to Doug. He did a great job on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go over that for today to finish up with that after we go over the video. But so I'll go over how he did it and how he's able to ascertain exactly what the problem was. So we'll go ahead and get started first with where we were. We had gotten there. We had looked over the pad mount. We didn't see anything. We didn't see anything skewed on the pad like something had gotten hit. But we said that's usually higher traffic areas that happens. We're out behind a church. We've got 2 services there, and we're looking at a 9S meter. From what we looked at so far, nothing looks super bad on it. It is another example, though. You can see it of those older test switches that they've got on this system, and some of them are not in too good a shape, so you got to kind of check those out. And we looked at that and made some notes of that on there. But it's so far so good. I mean, we didn't see anything that really, caused us to really throw our hands up. But we're at a point now where we're going to go ahead and start into the actual. We're going to make the connections, and we're going to go ahead and do the meter test. And as I said, next week we'll go over the CT test, because that's where we really got to the bottom of what our problems were at this site. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start in with this is where we looked over everything, and we're ready to go ahead and connect everything up and go ahead and test the meter first. Okay. Okay, so now we're here at the 9S for the service for the sanctuary, and you can see here that Jonathan. And guys that do this a lot, you can see they normally have their cables hung over their lid in a certain way. And Jonathan's got his way, everybody's got a different way, but you can see that he's got them hung over there, which is once he gets everything out of the case, it just makes it easier, and he's used to grabbing this and that. And you'll notice which one he went for first. He went for those duck bills, because he puts his duck bills in first. So he went for the duck bills, and so we're going to just go through the process. He goes through the test, this 9S. So we looked, and we got a decent load on this, right? Yep. So we're looking, and we see looking on the screen of the meter display of the meter, we're seeing it come across there. So we feel like, yeah, we got a good load. So we think we're going to go for a customer load test. So now he's coining those surfaces by moving those duck bills back and forth, and so get it good, because we're in an area that has corrosion. So, and he puts his shunts back in, closes those back in. Don't leave those open, or you've left the circuit open. You won't get your secondary current. And so now he's just going to move forward. He's got his duck bills in. And so now we always connect the neutral first for safety.
Since we don't have a ground.
That's right. Cool.
And then laying us in gear again. Make sure the screen goes out.
So he opened up one of his voltages. Screen went blank on him, so he knew that the meter wasn't seeing power for a minute. Then he closed it back in, waited for the screen to come back up, and now we know we're going to start getting pulses emitted through that comport or hog nose there on that Landis gear. While Jonathan's setting up the site on the 9S, they're going to test on this one. Just another quick thing, and we talk about all these because while we're out here, we want to point as many things out as we can. We got a windy day today, so these doors on these transformers can slam, and you notice where Jonathan's got these wires coming to his flexes right here, okay? You got a way that you can lock that door right there. We definitely recommend if you don't have something there, it's gotten broken off over the year, whatever, find something to wedge and keep that door from slamming into those wires, because that can also cause you a problem, okay? When you get a lot of wind, this is just a big sail right here, so it'll grab it and slam it. And so definitely lock that door in place so it doesn't hit your wires going to your flex probes, okay? Because it'll definitely pinch them and grab them right there along this metal edge right there, which is never a good idea. We don't want metal on those cables going to those flexes, right? So always get this door stabilized if you're in windy conditions.
Go ahead and bring up my vectors. A phase is right there borderline. It's just a touch below half amp secondary. It'll probably test all right.
Okay, so you remember I said that half amp, and you heard Jonathan just say the half amp, and y'all remember where we're getting that from. We use that as our general number, as our go and no-go, and whether we can probably test that site and get a good accurate test on our CTs. Where we get that number from is, remember, you're always asking for, ANSI does, they ask for 10% of the rating of that CT, right? So if you got an 800 to 5 CT, they want you to have at least 80 amps test and it be legit and qualified and per ANSI, right? Well, anytime you go, you know, a tenth on the one side, you have to go a tenth on the other side. So if you had 80 amps on an 800 to 5, you know, you would have 0.5 amps on the secondary. It's always going to be a tenth, right? So it's always 5 amps on that secondary side, right? So if I take a tenth of the primary side, the secondary side is always going to be 0.5, right? It's always going to be a tenth since I took a tenth. So on an 800 to 5, it'll be 80 or 0.5. You know, on a 400, it'll be 40 or 0.5. So it's always 0.5. So that's why we get that number 0.5. We know that if it's not at least 0.5, we know we're not at 10% of the rating of it, and that's why we use that bogey as our number, all right? So that's what he's looking at right there. And you'll see here in a second, as he talks about this, you'll notice that our numbers on A, you can see the larger angle on A versus B and C. You also notice shorter here and here than there. This is where we're really using those vectors, right, already to start figuring out some things in our head. We're starting to already look at some things. There's nothing that's glaringly bad, but these are all clues in case we see something as we move forward, and we will. And then when we see that, we're going to remember back to this, okay? Thanks, JP.
B's about 0.8, C's about 0.6. So we've got enough load on it.
We've got enough load, but to what you just said, we can look at that vector as well. Remember, we've talked about the length of the vector is the amplitude, right? So not only did he check the number, but just at first glance, you can see the vector for the current on A phase is shorter than B and C, right? So I know I've got less amps on A than I do B or C. Just looking at the length of the vectors. But then he also looks over there and verifies with the actual numbers down the right side.
And typically most places A is the one that's loaded up. Normally A is the full length and B and C are real short because that's right. Just inside. That's how the panels normally get loaded up. That's how they wire the panels up. How what's your power factors looking like? Power factor system's 0.99, so I'd say that's probably all right.
Yeah, that's not bad, is it? And worst one is obviously A, right?
A is about 0.83, but the average for the whole site.
Sure. I stopped JP at just the wrong time. I don't know if you could see down here at the bottom. I guess you could go forward just a little bit to where that one spot's off that to where they could see. I was just going to point out one thing.
Which is what the meter's looking at, is 0.99.
That's right. And how can you tell just by a glance? Bingo. There you go. Perfect. Nice shot. Okay, so we've talked about the rotation on these two before, right? So it's either going to be ABC or CBA. And we've talked about this before. This is a good chance to show it. This CBA rotation, A is going to be always our reference voltage. So A is typically always going to be right here, okay, on a Y. So we're always going to have A here. The difference is going to be these two being swapped, okay? Initially, when I first did this, y'all know my story. I was thrown out there with no training. So when they told me the difference in rotations of A, B, C, and CBA, I was thinking it would literally rotate all the way around, right? And it doesn't. A stays here, and these are the two that change. So if you're going clockwise like this, now it's actually, technically, it's ACB, but we call this CBA rotation. So when we're going this way, it should be ABC, but if it's not, if these two are swapped, we call it a CBA rotation, and you can see that right down here. Thanks, JP. It's that the power factor is worse on A than B and C.
The separation here between your voltage and your current, further separation you've got, the worse your power factor is. You see,
exactly.
C and B are real close together, not much separation. A is farther apart, and then you can check the numerical values right there to see that A is 0.83, 0.82, B's 0.9, C's 0.9.
Exactly. So we've always said over and over, you've heard us say it there in Knox Vegas, the bigger the angle, the worse the power factor. So when Jonathan first glanced at that screen, he saw a bigger angle on A than he did B or C. B or C are real tight, but so he knows not only he had less current because of the length of the vector, but he also knew that he had a worse power factor than the other two because of that. But the overall system, did you hear that little comment that he made? What the meter sees, because the meter's seeing all three. So that system average in total there is what it's seeing. So it's still going to be a good power factor as far as the meter sees it. But just make a note of, we noticed less on A because of length and bigger angle meant that it was the worst power factor. Okay.
Then I went ahead and toggled over to primary since I've got my flex rings hooked up, just to kind of look and see what those vectors look like, to make sure I didn't accidentally turn an arrow upside down or something, or make sure maybe a CT is not mounted backwards.
Perfect. Always look at that primary. If you have 3 flexes on there and you can see it, why not look at it? It takes 2 seconds to hit that primary current button and take a look at my primary. You may discover a problem you wouldn't if you just rock and rolled right through there and just looked at the secondary side.
On my integrated site test setup, the last one we did, I just left this test time at 0. So we went ahead and got all 3 pulses. This time I put in a 30-second timeout. So if we get maybe our first pulse takes 45 seconds, 1 pulse we're done and on to the CT test.
That's right. And he checked his double wrap box because he double wrapped him.
And of course our line diagrams. Vector's still looking good. There's a lot of times you'll be out in the field and you'll pre-check your vectors, go through your test setup, start the test, and then the load will drop off before you start the meter test. It always break your heart.
Yeah, it will, because you won't have enough to really test. And then you'll look at the vectors again, and where that vector was this long, now all of a sudden the vector is really short like that, because remember the amplitude thing. So that's exactly right. You can get a load change. You know, everybody leaves the school or whatever it is, and all of a sudden they shut everything off, and you're like, oh. And then you start looking at the at that number we're looking for, right, which is 0.5 on that secondary, and you're going, doggone it, now I probably need to go to a phantom load test. Good point. So you're noticing one thing here. It's taking us it's taking a little bit of some time here, right? We said it's always these clues. So we're always looking for clues. And right now, what we're seeing on A phase, we don't like what we're seeing on A phase, definitely compared to B and C phases. And now we're noticing it's taking us a long time to get the registration test done. So we're starting to think, you know, that maybe I don't know. And I'm going to cover something real quick right here on this, which is interesting. When I saw this again, evidently this, and anybody that's used equipment, especially our equipment, or have used any equipment, know that you can set up a pass or fail range, right? What's pass or fail on there? Well, evidently, where I'd been using the kit before, right, I had set it up as 0.5 being a pass or fail. Here you can tell, right, because it up as 0.2, I would have a fail here, right? Because it would be 99.8 to 100.2 would be a pass. So I just noticed this and I thought to myself, evidently I had been testing other meters that were only 0.5 range, or either that's what the utility had asked me to do. They had said make it 0.5, because otherwise I wouldn't have gotten a test complete down here, which says everything's okay. I would have gotten some red lettering down here saying, man, you might want to check your connections, right? So if for this to say that's a pass and that's okay, I don't know if anybody noticed that or not. This is a little, I guess, what would you call this? Next level or advanced or whatever. Then you would say, I can tell right now that that's not 99.8, between 99.8 and 100.2. It's less than that. So actually, if I had it set at 0.2, it would be a fail. So just looking at that, I just made a mental note to myself as I was watching. I said, well, it must have been set at 0.5, and it's just barely over that, so it passed it. Which is another thing to notice, by the way, was that 95. Right, 99.505. All clues. So it went through and it gave us test complete. It went through, you can see that it went through the 30 seconds before it, so it only got the 1 pulse, right? So this is what we were just talking about is, if you have, right, if you have the timeout, if you set it as 30 seconds or 3 revs, it timed out on the 30 seconds before it got 3 complete pulses. But at the bottom of the screen where it says test in progress in red, now it says test complete in black. So it went through the time. So if we would still be sitting there waiting if he had just left it at 0 and 30 seconds. Cool. So what we have put together so far on this one, we haven't We're going to do the CTs next week. So far right now we've seen, just look at the meter and looking at pre-check and everything we've seen, we know A phase looks a lot worse vectorially than B and C phases. I've got a worse power factor. I've got less current than in either of the other two phases. So A is not looking as good as B and C. It took a while for me to get my customer load test right because I went 30 seconds or 3 revs and I only got 1 pulse in 30 seconds. So, which we saw that there was enough load there. Probably should have done a little better than that. So all these things are, right now I'm just kind of filing them away. And as long as everything else continues to go well, I would be fine. But when I run into something, because I don't go out there and just do one test, right? Typically, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to test the meter and the CTs. And I may go out there and do a customer load test and a phantom load test on that meter and do the CT test. Well, as I'm doing these other tests, I make these notes of these things so that when I go to the next test, if that issue jumps out at me and let's say I get a failure or something, I can say, well, wait a minute, what I saw earlier, I need to take that stuff and I need to use it to do my problem solving on the test that it did fail.
Hold on just a second.
Sure.
We've crashed. I've got a hold on.
Cool.
Oh, I think we're back.
Are we back?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I was just looking on here and I saw.
Sorry about that.
I'm going, that's kind of cool. Okay.
You can go.
We're good? Okay. So what you'll do is, like I said, you'll gather stuff from maybe the test you did before, like in this case, stuff that I've gleaned from the customer load test, and the customer load test passes fine. Remember, the meter's just looking at what the meter sees. It's the same thing if you have polarity reversal or something like that, right? The meter's not seeing as much as it should see, but what it's seeing, the meter's testing accurately. So that's why you make little notes of little things you've seen, and then when you get to the CTs, you get ready to test them, and something jumps out at you. Those are clues that help you get to the bottom of what the cause is, okay? I wanted to talk about a situation ran into at a utility, and I thought it was pretty slick the way that this tech troubleshot this thing. Again, hats off to Doug. So I thought that he did pretty well in this. I'm going to let JP swing this bad boy around. Cool. All right. So, and you can see here, none of this is energized, by the way, before somebody calls and jumps on me, George. And, oh, wait, I'm not making you jump around, aren't I? Okay, sorry about that.
You're good.
Okay, so we're good for both now?
Yes.
Cool. Excellent. That's why he's the man. Okay, so here's the thing. This is similar to what I've drawn up here, I was just going to say. So when I was at this utility and the tech and I were out there, he got ready to run his tests. And he, similar to what we're seeing on the one we're watching now, he didn't like what he was seeing as far as how long it was taking him to get his meter test done. He didn't like that. But then when he got ready to test the CTs, he really saw a problem that jumped out at him. Okay, and remember, this is I've got it drawn out here. This is my meter. Okay, this is my test switch. Current. Here's my current on A, my shunt, and then my return current for A. Coming back through, right, and going back to the return on the CT, and it's coming out of here and going up through the shunt and going up meter and coming back and going here, right? And here's my voltage on A phase. And here would typically be one of my black phenolics would probably be right here, because it always is going to separate the voltages, right? We've talked about that a lot. Well, if you look over here, that's similar to what I've got here, right? I've got my shunt and my returner right here, right next to one another. Okay, so this is similar to what we've got right here, okay? So this looks pretty close to that I'm looking at there. So he got ready to do his CT test, and what he came out with was, when you start looking and you're looking at your secondary current, and we've talked about this before, and when you look at your secondary current and you get 0.0000 amps, when you just get zeros and you get nothing, that starts making you lean more towards a disconnect versus a problem of too much resistance burden, too long of wires, loose connection, all that. There should be something gets through there. When I'm zero, all zeros across there, then I start thinking more disconnect than I do, like I said, something loose. So when Doug was out here looking at this thing, he said, okay, So he didn't like his initial numbers. They didn't look good. And then he toggled between his primary current and his secondary current. Remember we just talked about this here. So when Doug did that and he toggled between his primary and secondary current, remember initially he was just looking at secondary, right? When he toggled over and looked at his primary current, he had primary current. So it wasn't like there wasn't any primary current. He could see the primary current. When he hit primary, the primary current was there. But then when he went to secondary, it was zeros. So that's making you think there's some sort of a disconnect between my primary and my secondary, right? And where does a lot of those connections and everything come into play? It comes into play right here at this test switch, right? So I'm coming from the CTs. I've got my primary. I've got my primary conductor running through here. And here's where I'm pulling off. This is your and mine's primary, all right? That's the lineman's primary. This is our primary right here. It's coming in here. And when it feeds here, if I've got 0, then there's some sort of a disconnect between here and here, okay? So in this case, what he did was he checked the switch. First, he cleaned the switch up real good, okay? Sprayed it off, cleaned it off because it was pretty rough, so he cleaned it all up. Then here was something that I really liked that he did. He jumpered across, and we make these for folks. Instead of the easy hooks that you have to do the phantom load test, to jumper across there at the test switch, for some folks, they prefer alligator clips. So he had some of these alligator clip jumpers. So it's just an alligator clip on each end, about this long. So what he did was he just jumpered across that test switch. So he just jumpered across there and jumpered across there. So he just came right here and jumpered across top and bottom across here to take the test switch out of it. In other words, to take these blades and the switch out of it. So he just jumped straight across and went over them. When he did that, everything tested fine. Okay? So then he had, and all of us were on the same page with him, he realized the problem was right here. Okay, the problem was in his test switch. There was a disconnect there between the test switch between here and there, all right? So between coming off of my lineman primary to what is now considered mine, coming in here, my primary feeding my meter, all right? But it's still primary, secondary, technically. So this coming in here, when it came in, there was a disconnect in here and it wasn't making it through. So that's why it was showing 0 here. So when Doug jumpered it across there, then everything showed up fine. Okay. Another thing that he did, he was actuating those blades to check them out. He also shunted. He opened up the shunt. And when he opened up the shunt blade, he came over here and just clamped on there with a meter and just read it. Because remember, when you open that shunt blade up, what you're doing is you're taking it from here and you're going boom and right back. You're not going up above on the test switch, right? You're taking it here up is gone now. When I open that shunt blade up, now it just stays and it comes right from that dot, comes right through here and comes right back, okay? So when he did that and read here, he also had current there, okay? So he's got current here, he's got the current on the primary that he can read, so the problem was right in here. And sure enough, when they changed out that test switch, everything was fine. So as I said, kudos to him. He did a great job on it. I thought you guys would want to see that because a lot of tools were used in that. He looked at his vectors. He used that primary versus the secondary really well to see, no, the primary current's there. And notice in those zeros, so he also shunted and measured down here and checked out that secondary loop side. And he had current there. He knew he had the primary there, so the problem was right in here. So he did a great job on that. And I just wanted you to point out several of the little things he used in it. Again, we really appreciate, just this past week, I talked to a couple people on the phone, and they were giving a lot of kudos to JP and to Chris for all this. So appreciate that. Thank you for that. We know a lot of you guys are watching these either on your own time, safety meetings or other meetings or stuff. So we just appreciate it. Any feedback you can give us, any suggestions or anything, also please let us know. But just thank y'all for another day. And also keep in mind when you're looking at all this stuff, there's the most important thing of all this, safety, 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 right? Get home to your families, all right? That's the most important thing. So God bless y'all. Have a great day, all right? Appreciate it.